Well, thank you, Francois, very much. I wish I could understand some French. But anyway, unfortunately for tonight, I have to speak English, and it will be translated into French, so that toward the end, again, using these two languages, we can have a conversation. The topic of my presentation tonight is, as you see, a form and content. So I would like to define form first. So form in English, I suspect, probably is similar in French, is defined first as figure, form, or appearance. And the second meaning of form is system, structure, or organization. The one I'm interested in this case, is actually a third meaning of form, which is discipline. I would like to show to you that meaning through a Chinese Tang Dynasty poem. I see quite a few Chinese faces. I'm sure you all know this particular poem. This poem, as you can see, even for the French audience, so if you see on your right-hand side, there are 4 lines in Chinese, and each line consists of 5 characters. What you don't see, of course, is in this poem. So we have 4 pitches for a character. So every pitch of the character is dictated. And of course, as a typical classical poem, it rhymes. In this case, the rhyme happens on the second line and the 4th line. So altogether, all these limitations in Chinese is one word, is Lu. So this kind of a poem, they are called Lu poem, which means, interestingly, disciplined poem. So that's what I'm interested in form. That's a kind of a discipline for me. Is very much like the way we think about form in architecture. So, of course, this is the design of Miss Van der Rohe, the Farnsworth house. It's one of maybe the first glass house ever built. And the question I have would be, what is the form of a glass house? What is discipline? So I'll show you another one. It's also a very well-known one. It's by Philip Johnson and for himself. And if you compare these two houses, what's in common is that a glass house is about transparency, so that it's an extrovert house, or it's an open structure. It's open towards outside, it's open towards inside. So a glass house cannot have rooms. If we say a glass house with rooms, that would be an oxymoron in English. So you see 2 glass houses. How do we as architects to put that form art discipline in a nutshell. I think the way we draw in this case, however, probably simplified, generalized, is very effective. It's a diagram. We put down a diagram for, I did, for a glass house. So it's an empty space with almost nothing in there. There is something, the dotted line there, that box meant to be a small area that is not transparent. Is an object, probably even an obstacle in a glass house. So ideally, that's not there. So basically, this absolute pure space is what the essence of a glass house. So it differentiates a glass house from other kind of spaces or architecture. So I thought about glass house a lot because I find transparency fascinating. I thought the idea of room, or rather the absence of room, interesting. So I tried a number of times. Once I designed a glass house like this. This is a setup plan. From the left is the basement level. And then the second from left is where you enter the house. And then you see a bathtub, a toilet, and a clothes rack. And then you get up from the spiral staircase to a level with furniture. And then you go up to the top floor where you have a pure space, meaning that it's where the resident will get more spiritual, and then you meditate and maybe do some yoga is okay, right? So you get the picture. And then, however, if you look at the section, there are actually 4 rooms because the glass floor would divide this tall space into 4 rooms. 4 rooms stacked upon each other. And then, of course, as a glass house, the roof is also transparent. So the glass house is for an urban setting so that you have privacy around, and then you have transparency connecting the inhabitants, in this case, to the sky above and earth below. So the house was built after I drew it in 1991. It was built in 2013, so after 20-some years. And that's from the outside, and that's how it is inside. You can see the glass floors. You can see light coming down. So the notion of room is there, but it's not quite the way a room is typically, yes, a room or a wall is typically used. So I wasn't satisfied with a glass house of rooms in such a manner, so I tried another time. So in this case, this is now a floor plan. So you can see there are 4 rooms, and with a cruciform wall in the middle. But these are not an opaque, solid wall as we see in most buildings, but rather a hollowed double glass wall. So you have a wall which would offer you privacy, at least in terms of sound, but visually it's still transparent. So this is a glass house with 4 rooms. So that oxymoron I talked about, in fact, could happen in reality. And then the 4 rooms are, at that time, the large one is the living room, a little smaller is the bedroom, even smaller is kitchen and dining, and then the smallest is a bathroom. So that's the final plan. And as you can see, the 4 rooms have become of the same, exactly the same size and shape and dimension. That's something important I would address in a short while. So the question from can a glass house have rooms now becomes, what's the difference between a living room and a bathroom, for instance? And the house was completed recently, although I don't have the latest photographs to show. From the ground level, when you look up the 4 rooms upstairs, and that's what you see. And it's actually, it's like a light well. So it's open to the sky, the rain would come down and so on. Of course, I have a disclaimer to make. I don't mean any religious connotation. You're probably wondering about that anyway. And then so again, from the ground floor, then you look up, you see the connection between the 2 floors. So on the upper level, these are the rooms. And then around the room, and there is a water garden. So you can see there's a courtyard wall surrounding the glass pavilion. So this is another thing about a glass house. Maybe I was intentionally contradict. And I talked about an extrovert glass house, but it's possible to have also an introverted glass house as such. And then in the glass house, there's always an issue of a new tectonic relationship between the glass and the supporting columns. For Johnson and Mies, it was a steel column. And then for our building, it's a concrete load-bearing wall. The load-bearing walls are pulled in so that we could have a very clean glass enclosure. So that's another thing architects, or rather only architects would care about, is how to make a glass enclosure as pure as possible. But anyway, okay, here I was receiving a very young visitor to the construction site. So the house does have some kind of advantages. That's from the outside. So what I like to point out, what's interesting for me to have a very disciplined floor plan, if possible, is that you start to, with this quartered square floor plan, so one starts to imagine a different kind of lifestyle. So the very last conversation I had with the construction team was all about how to have a guest in this house, also in case someone would need to use the bathroom. So we actually have a curtain around the bedroom as well as the bathroom, so that you can pull this soft wall close if you need to have privacy. So that's one thing that's very important. That design of a way of living is exactly, I like to define the word content of architecture today. So the content is how we use the building. They were these very rational code words we like to use: function, of course, usage, and so on. Program, maybe slightly better, but I like to suggest actually is really the way people live. So this is a drawing I'm very much interested in, not only because I'm giving a talk in Paris. I show it a lot everywhere. What's interesting for me is that I thought I was doing something innovative with the quartered plan, but at that time I didn't know that plan, that diagram, or use the original French expression, the partie, has existed since the time of the end of 18th century or the beginning of 19th century. So that plan, here is the left column, the fifth one from the top. So it's there sitting and waiting maybe for an architect to use it. In other words, an architect doesn't really have to reinvent the wheel, but rather to select a partie. So that was the whole idea. In China, for people who play the game of Go, all know it very well. When you play Go, the first moves, you don't have to come up new strategies every time. You remember, it's called 定式. You memorize them and then you use them. And there's the same story here. So you memorize these diagrams. For, I don't know if people in the audience still are interested in the American architect John Haydock. Haydock was into all his life. Now the second column, the second diagram from the top is called a 9-grade problem. Haydock didn't invent it. He also decided that's a good partie for him to develop design as well as pedagogical strategies. And anyway, so for me, it's very important to understand actually architecture form has a disciplined aspect. Often gave architecture a very strong spatial quality. So I was doing more designs, especially houses, with different parties. And this is from, again, the second column, the top one, which I like to call it with the English word triptych. Triptych is a painting that you can close like this. So 3 even spaces. And then this is a study of a triptych house with a certain topological conditions. And so you can see it could be one whole house. It could become a house with 2 parts. And then one of them, the one at the right lower corner, was built in Beijing. it was called a split house. It's exactly one variation of that particular party. To split a house is not just to be conformed with or to that particular party, but rather is to use it, in this case, to save trees and to negotiate a slope so that the courtyard is enclosed by the natural topography as well as, of course, architecture. And then this is another triptych house is more straightforward. And so from the outside, it looks like this. Once you go in, there's a courtyard. And you live on one side, you work on the other side. You always have to pass through the courtyard to get to the other side, the other half of your living. And then the nice curvilinear building behind it, that's not by our office, but by the Portuguese architect Álvaro Siza. The project is in Ningbo. And then from these plans with discipline or parties, I was thinking that we could also think about building elements as part of this composition or organization. So this one is about, you see something is sticking out from the wall. And actually that's the one end of a column. I'm sorry, a beam. So the beam goes through the entire length of the studio house, like that. So it's something almost like living in the house. As you can see, we used rebars, reinforced steel bars to make a handrail so that the artist could walk on top of the beam. So it's a beam that would become part of the circulation, would support the movement of a human being and so forth. So also you can hang maybe your work from the beam if you so wish. And this one, if we can say for the other house, the inhabitant has to live with the beam. Here, the inhabitant has to live with the roof. It's an inverted roof. A pitched roof typically is like this, and this one is like that. So once you go in, there are two spaces. One is a workspace, a studio, the tall one on the left. And on the right, actually, there's a mezzanine where the living space is located. And so it becomes two spaces really sharing one spatial organization. One may not see what's happening on the other side, but constantly aware there is the other side. And so these are the 4 studio houses in Ningbo as a small village. So anyway, through these house projects, I hope that you get an idea what I think is very important for me as a practitioner is to think in a very essential architectural way. And then doing diagrams helps me a great deal. So still back to the quarter plan. If you turn the cross in the middle of the square, 45 degrees, like the one in the middle, and then cut out, not making 4 triangular rooms, but to cut out the central portion. And then on the right, what you have actually is a courtyard house. So a courtyard house would have a typical plan like this in Beijing. And for contemporary people, however you think a traditional courtyard house is lovely, actually it's not the most convenient house you could have, because you have to pass through the courtyard to get from one room to another. And then on the way, you may, because you open and close the doors of these rooms, you may lose energy in the winter and the summer. So what we thought would be a contemporary version of a courtyard house is to have a circular, although it's actually not round, but it's a loop of a space as the living room. And because of that, the whole lifestyle, again, could really embrace the courtyard, which means that you start in the western wind in the morning because the sun's coming in from the east, and have breakfast there. And then you move towards the north at noontime, and eventually on the eastern wind in the afternoon. In the evening, where the dining room is, you will entertain friends. So a lifestyle that follows the movement of the sun throughout the day is what we imagine for our clients. It's a young family. It's parents of a mom and dad and the 3 kids. So that's the floor plan, and that's the outside of the house, the facade. It's a very humble, discreet facade, as you can see. And once inside is a house like this. The eaves coming out from outside are very low, so that would make the courtyard more open. Meanwhile, would bring the whole architecture down to a more human scale. And then there are these sliding huge glass doors would open up the courtyard house. And so the outdoor and indoor space are very much integrated. I'll go back one slide. So what's interesting for me is actually not only the quarter space plan is back, the glass house is back as well. So this is very much similar in a way to the Miss Van der Rohe house or the Philip Johnson house, but yet this glass curtain panorama is not on the outside, but it's in the center. So it's a glass house, but turned inward. And you can see, so beyond the facade, and you enter the house, this is the lobby, and then you make a turn, you see the courtyard. So in the morning, the light comes into the western wing. That's where the kitchen is, and the breakfast area is located. And then follow the sun, you can see the sun is rising up, and then the northern wind will get more daylight, and then eventually the eastern wind, and of course, in the evening, you are in the southern part. So Of course, as architects, whatever lifestyle we may have imagined, it may not fully embrace the way people would actually live in the house we designed. It turned out the young couple, they enjoy very much living in the house. The people who truly enjoy and love the house are the two young boys. They like to run around along the glass enclosure and shouting and screaming, anyway, having fun. And I took this picture, and then you can see at their home now. So it's not our glass house, but rather it's their home. And the parents are preparing food, entertaining guests who are us, the architects, and then the kids are running around. And this is a detail because we're using steel as the structure, and then as the preservation requirements of Beijing, we have to use traditional tiles. For us, it wasn't a problem. Interestingly, it created these kind of rather, even for us, unusual details of architecture. For me, it's actually inspiring because we never thought we could design something like this. Maybe that would lead to other ideas which would combine more the traditional materials and craftsmanship with the more contemporary ones. So I talked about how the French party, the classical architecture used in a traditional Chinese setting, which is what we call the loop house. And then what's interesting for me is that notion of understand a design of architecture from these simple diagrams could actually be a lot more than just a plan. In this case, it's a museum we designed initially for the first Chinese abstract painter, and his name is Wu Dayu, who came to Paris to study and then returned to China, first to teach in Hangzhou at the today's China Academy of Art. And then in early 1950s, he returned to his home in Shanghai, stayed in about 10 square meter attic, and did small postcards, paintings, until he passed away in 1988. So that's one of his paintings, always abstract, to the point that at one exhibition, someone hung his paintings upside down. And once the person realized it and wanted to correct it, and he said, "Please don't. I really don't care which one is up or which one is down." So there's a very different way of thinking for this artist. And he also wrote articles. If you can read the Chinese side, fantastic. But otherwise, the English translation is not too bad. I did it. Anyway, so the poetry of Wu Dayu, in fact, at first glance would look classical because it's 4 lines against 7 words for each line. But actually, it's not a classical poem at all. He adopted a rather a classical form, but fill it with a very interesting perception of, here you can see how a person would, the person was himself, of course, would move through a piece of architecture, although he never used the word architecture. So he talked about the relationship between shadow and figure, time and space, and sound, and without trace, and then the contradiction of darkness of light. And so he described his movement and so on. So for me, it was very important to discover this poem of the artist. It really is a reminder that as architects, why can't we design time? So I'm fully aware of the limitation of my simple diagrams. But before I gave that up, I diagrammed two different time. One is the Eastern time. The other one, of course, the Western time. According to a book called On Time by a French philosopher, François Julien. He's a very brilliant contemporary philosopher. So I'm paraphrasing him because I don't remember the exact words. But basically, the idea is this. For the Western idea of time, which is above, so the observer is always outside of time and looking onto time. So there is a beginning, there is an end. And then the time would move one directional, like a one-way street. And then time can be divided evenly and incrementally. So like if you have if you have a watch, so it's like the second hand would move evenly and incrementally. So that's what this rational time is about. Of course, the idea came with the development of science in the West. So Julian called it the Western time. But the Chinese time, the observer is inside the time. And then so because you are within time, you don't know where it started. You don't know where it will eventually end. So there's no end and, of course, no beginning. And then not only you move towards time, and time moves also towards you. So that kind of objective time, subjective time becomes very interesting because it actually offers a design opportunity. The subjective time, I got all screwed up. the Western, the rational time, the objective time, of course, because it's the measurable time. It can't be actually designed, but the subjective time is something that could be designed, such as this bridge. This bridge is not a unique design, but rather pretty common in Chinese older gardens. So the idea, of course, has a visible form, as you can see. The zigzagging is kind of a striking visually, but it's more important to understand when you cross the water with more steps, you spend more time on the bridge. Actually, you would feel the space on the water is bigger. So that was the whole trick, if I may. So because a lot of these scholars' gardens in cities like Suzhou and so on, they are in this kind of a tight urban context. They would want to design it so the garden would feel more spacious. So anyway, and Wu Dayu and his poem probably more directly, and his art, his paintings probably less so, and then of course a traditional garden and so on, took us to a place where we thought we could design, or rather make an attempt to design time. What we did is very simple, because for the younger generation of architects, I can fully understand if you are not terribly interested in Renaissance one-point perspective. But for me, because I learned still to use my hands to construct on a sheet of paper perspectives. So the one-point perspective, the simplest perspective, so still means a lot for me. I have a feeling that I truly understand it. So I use that as really an analogy maybe of the Chinese time, and then organize this entire art museum for the work of Wu Dayu with these spatial wedges, if you want to put it. They all taper space, sometimes in the plan, sometimes actually more in the section or in 4 dimensions. So this is in the city of Wuzhen in the province of Zhejiang. So here it comes an idea very much similar to what the zigzag bridge is about. So this is the same wall. In the left hand, what you see is the wall appearing to be longer because of the exaggerated perspective. And on the other hand, the perspective is weakened by the exaggeration, so it would appear shorter. So in any case, I'm going to show you that little wedge-shaped space. So from one direction, it would be a deeper space, and it's different from the other side. So what interests me is that no longer using the simplest spatial parties as I started this talk, but to think about these rather prototypical spaces and then construct perhaps a richer time and space experience really as the content, so the word content of architecture. Because ultimately, I don't believe we can actually measure either time or space. So immeasurability actually probably is a lot truer than whatever we can check with a clock or with a tape, etc. And this is another taper space. The project was never completed. The landscape was left as simple lawn, as you see here, and the interiors also left incomplete for very complicated reasons. I don't want to talk about them because I don't have the time to do so. But anyway, and here you can see how the basic forms. That's what we imagined. One of Wu Dayu's very well-known students, Wu Guanzhong, we put him in our rendering, and that's a water pond, which yet is waiting for the water to come in. And just different ways sometimes to invite people to look in, and sometimes rather to stop the vision and more close to the circulation and so on. So all these spaces I mentioned is to create an experience toward the end, maybe of some time spent in the art museum. The visitor would possibly actually already lost in space and time. So anyway, so these spaces, they are often a transition from one more functional space to another, yet it becomes really an important component of the entire experience here. So we treated the gardens very much like interior spaces. And to further inviting people to lose themselves, so we have curved linear space like such, and triangular space, etc. The interior space, again, is tapered, and a very shallow space again. Yet another very shallow yet translucent space. Structure system for the tapered tea house and the reception space, all using concrete. So this is a guest house for the artist. So anyway, the idea is that experience of time and space I talked about, it wasn't really in the design brief. It wasn't given by the client. But as the architect, we understand the temporal and spatial experience will for sure happen there. It's as much as part of the content as a toilet or a bedroom. So, which means that we take the initiative as architects to actually to work on something that not really given by the client. Occasionally, also we try to even do more than that. We would like to imagine we could help with the client to select a site. I have to say it only worked out once, which is in this case. This is in the city of Jishou, which is the regional capital of Jiangxi, the western Hunan province. In this case, the municipal government asked us to design an art museum for their city and gave us a piece of land in the new development zone. It's, of course, the land is flattened with very wide roads, big block, and often no trees and so on, because it's a tabula rasa, and it's often given to architects for design in such a kind of conditions. What I minded actually at that time is more the location of such site. It's far from where people living. I thought maybe we should bring the art to the people, to be close to all the folks living in the city of Jishou. So we should put the art museum right in the center of the old town. That's where it is. And then the client accepted the idea, and collectively we, of course, discovered the city center is a river, and then the museum has to be a bridge. So we picked a location for a bridge. And you can see eventually, of course, a covered bridge is built and as the museum, but still with a footbridge as part of it. And the bridge is not an object freestanding in the city, but rather it connects the fabric of the city on the two river banks. And this is a traditional covered bridge. It's very important to learn the content of the covered bridge. It's very different from a typical footbridge. You may think the visual form is quite spectacular. I would agree with that. But the point I'd like to make is that very often a covered footbridge is really like a town square with a roof. People come out there to meet with friends, older people to play chess. Children would go there gathering and also play and so on. It really is one of the more lively urban public spaces in traditional towns. So we like to make our art bridge, our art museum bridge, also into this kind of a public space for the city of Jishou. So the design is this. On the bottom, there is a steel bridge. The material of steel is given by the municipal water bureau because in this part of China, every year the flood comes. What we need to consider as the maximum amount of flood water actually is a so-called 50-year flood. However, to play safe, so the Water Bureau and us, we discussed and then decided to build the pedestrian bridge with steel so to allow more flood water to go through. Meanwhile, the steel members could also cut the tree branches and so on. So it's just to play safe with the water disaster. We designed the footbridge. And then on top, there's a concrete bridge, and in the middle, between these two bridges is a great exhibition hall. So this is the footbridge. And when we basically have the idea of that triple decker design, also we thought maybe we should make sure people would see art on this bridge. So on top of the footbridge, we have two huge skylights open into the art museum. So when you pass the bridge and you happen to look up, you may see something you like in art museum. So the next time when you cross the bridge, you would more willing to go in and to appreciate art. So that's why the big windows on the ceilings are for. And you see people resting on the footbridge, the great exhibition hall, and with exhibitions of local artists, the painting gallery, and local painters' work, etc. And since it's a bridge the museum has 2 entrances. And then inside one of the entrances, you enter, you go up a staircase into the painting gallery, and then you come down to the great exhibition hall. So I'll go a little faster. So I talked about how we would start from the form and then eventually think about the content within. But occasionally, a project for us is very much about the design of content from the very beginning. This is a competition we entered for the China Academy of Art in Hangzhou, their new campus in the district of Liangzhu. So when there were 3 finalists left for this competition, the president of this art-based comprehensive university asked us, 3 architects with background or current jobs also as teachers, to conceive an educational system for the school. And that's what our office came up with. I just give you a few points. You don't have to really decipher this whole diagram. Basic idea is that since it's an art school, so every student would learn to use her hands to make and to think always at the same time. So that's what the hands-on experience is about. And because architecture is a discipline that would allow a student to learn to integrate all the different knowledges together, and also to use the hand and to think spatially. So every student would take architecture as part of general education. And for the upper levels, all the courses are research/practice-based. So a team of students and the faculty would work on a research problem together as a way to acquire knowledge and to debate and so on. And then students would live on top of the learning and teaching spaces, because that's how life can, and work and life study can truly be integrated. So midnight, you get an idea, you want to do some work, you come right down to the studio and work on it. And during the day, you get tired, you can go upstairs anytime to take a nap, and so on. So that's what we imagine. Within the dormitories, students can have hobby clubs. The idea of hobby class is about making classes by students themselves for whatever is not offered by the school, so et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, when I made this kind of a fantastic educational program, I didn't think that the school would take it very seriously. I also told them to abolish all the departments, actually, as well as colleges. Just the whole campus is one big teaching unit. Eventually, they did get rid of the departments and so on. So anyway, and here is the master plan. You see pretty much the entire campus, more or less, covered by this carpet of studios and with dorm towers on top. And in section, you see the studios from one side to the other, and again, the dormitories on top. So that was the first phase when it was completed. And here you can see how the the perspective here of the studio spaces goes into the infinity, or it seems. And this is a typical bay of a studio from the outside. And from the outside with projected canopies, the courtyard space. And then that's also one of the projects. We started to think more specifically about how we, as architects, we may serve the people we're designing for, who are young people. We designed a smock, which up to today is not yet realized. And we also imagine they would move around like that. And today, they do use a lot of skateboards, young boys and girls. So this is in a dormitory. There are a lot of common spaces for them to do whatever. That's the whole point. And then hobby clubs. So far there are 12. This is the very first one. It's an archery club. And every student will take an architecture course. And one semester, what they learn is to design a way to live and study on our campus. So they make a huge model and to really imagine how they would like to take advantage of our spaces. And then you can see in the teaching learning space, and of course they could be rather conventional, old-fashioned courses, and then they could produce work and exhibit work all in the same space. And they can do more formal exhibitions. They can have dining space also in the teaching and learning studios. And they can do whatever they like, such as playing badminton. So anyway, and then they do stage plays, they do movies, all in the studio. You can now probably tell pretty well. And then on the outside, there are always places for students and faculty to sit around having a cigarette if you wish, or check out your WeChat. And here actually is a dormitory because it is really connected with studio. So the studio activity would come over, invade the dormitory, which is perfectly all right. Dormitory is so close to the learning teaching studios now that with the first class in the morning starts at 8:30, students usually get up at 8:15. So some of them probably wouldn't have time to have breakfast or don't care. But some do want to have a bite. So the school puts breakfast vendors right outside the studios so that they can order a breakfast pancake, a juanbing, to bring into the class. So that girl there is waiting for his juanbing. So anyway, you get an idea of how work and study, life and study, live and study, it really is mingled. And it created some issues maybe for architecture, such as how to deal with the laundry. In China, typically, the students wouldn't use a dryer, they use washers, and then they hung their laundry in the balcony. And then the design we did, of course, to unify the building facade and the laundry is like this. Actually, you saw it already. You may not notice it when you are far away. Actually, in that metal screen is where all the laundries are. And then there are more student activities, interactive design with our building. Turn the built reality back to a drawing, line drawing, and the projections like that. And this is the best one. They have not yet realized. It's from one of the balconies. You will see what happens. I don't need to say anything. Okay, that's enough. Anyway, that's where the project is. So by next year, the entire campus will be completed with a library in the middle and another exhibition space, a bigger one, also on your right. So the final project I'd like to present, you see right away, is a project here in Paris. In 2017, there was a competition. Whoever can all participate, as long as you have a team of French and Chinese architect partners. So we partnered with the office CAAU. Enter the competition. So here in this drawing, you see the bigger flag is where the site for the Chinese house, the Maison de la Chine is. And then I'm sure probably a lot of people here who are actually interested in architecture would have gone to see the Swiss house, the Brazilian house, and so on, which is on the opposite side. And interestingly, in mid-1930s, there was possibly the first Chinese students here in France studying architecture. With his graduation project, he designed a Chinese house for the International University city in Paris. His name is Yu Binglie. And at the time, when he designed it, it really earned him quite a big honor at the university. Also inspired a lot of Chinese students, scholars, and also French people very much interested in Chinese culture to imagine the realization of this project in the actual the Cité Universitaire. Anyway, because of the war, the Second World War, the World War II rather, and that the project was never realized. And then in recent years, of course, with the competition, and then the project got restarted. So at the beginning, I was thinking a dormitory building as a village because it's about living. So it's about a vernacular architecture. Sure, it's unlike Yu Binglie's proposal. is about monumental or classical architecture. So I did some sketches. However, soon we kind of gave up on that direction because there are two things we thought they were important for a dormitory building we need to focus our attention on. One, again, is about a form or a party. Several building types, dormitory, housing often, hotel, all share this party of a typical individual unit, but to be aggregated, multiplied, repeated. And so it creates a quite a specific and also probably limited form. And then this is one thing, it's about the form of aggregated units. The other one is one I learned from Le Corbusier. It's not how modern this Swiss house looks, but how modern his thinking was about the way students would live in a healthy way. And so all the 45 rooms are all looking out onto the landscape, so with a corridor on the other side, also with light. So it's a single-loaded corridor. So I think form and content for these projects should be really the departure of our project. So I redid the diagram so you can understand. So the bar building of Corbu is being wrapped around a central courtyard garden to make, now it's not 45 rooms, but 300 rooms we have. And then that reminded us of these circular buildings, although geometrically they are very different, but the idea is quite similar. So more sketches, and then that was the finalized plan. Here is a photograph of a model. So as you can see, the shape of the site is pretty odd. I kind of understood the idea. I think the master planner was trying to achieve some kind of a interlocking relationship between the neighboring houses. But in the reality, because it's very hard to really make the houses literally connect in any way, so it becomes still these rather freestanding structures. However, I think what's important for us in this case is to have a building to come up from the ground and then bring the landscape along with it. So that's something very different from Corbu's Swiss house. So this is our plan. The big space is a concert hall. And then on the upper level, so you can see, is this typical dormitory room being repeated and aggregated into this particular shape, so with the garden in the middle. So that was one of the study models. And this is a picture we took this morning. So the north side, and on the back of the building is a periphery with a lot of traffic and cars. And the material we used to express to pay homage of to traditional Chinese architecture from our generation of Chinese architects. So we used bricks. And then we were doing different details, also borrowing from traditional Chinese crafts. This is from a pagoda. This is a perforated wall out from the past. And this is our wall on the north side. So that detail on the top floor actually is from this. In Chinese, it's called 叠色. I don't know how to translate it, but anyway, it's to make the bricks cantilever. So again, the south side, the cantilever bricks, and the interior courtyard. It's not done yet. So you see missing pieces of the handrail panels. And then the roof garden is there for the people who may not be aware of something going on in Paris. It's in 2018 and 2019. President Sarkozy made a Grand Paris master plan. Within that, and he and his team actually mandated a roof garden for all these public buildings. So that's why it is part of the planning requirement. We have a roof garden. And then, of course, the advantage to be on top of the garden is what you can see towards a particular direction, of course. I'm talking about the Eiffel Tower. So here I end my talk. I hope you understand why content and form are important. I start talking about how form takes the lead, but eventually content takes the lead. In any case, I don't believe that architecture is dying, actually, simply because there's so much in architecture, or as architects, we could be more proactive about and to make a bigger contribution to the society, hopefully. Thank you.